Russia covers 1/8 of the world's land, but nearly 75% of its people are packed into the west, leaving massive areas almost empty. In Siberia, a region bigger than the whole of the United States, the population is smaller than Texas. Why does so much of Russia stay uninhabited despite its size and resources? Long before Russia claimed these vast territories, the land was home to diverse indigenous peoples who had mastered the art of survival in one of Earth's most challenging environments. From the reindeer herding Evenki to the resourceful Yakuts, these communities had developed remarkable adaptations to life in the extreme north. But how did Russia end up controlling such an enormous territory in the first place? The answer begins in the 16th century when the Russians first crossed the Ural Mountains. Led by the Cossack explorer Yermak Timofeyevich, this initial expansion wasn't driven by dreams of empire. It was driven by fur. The luxurious pelts of Siberian sables were worth their weight in gold, and the Russian Empire followed the paths of its ambitious fur traders eastward. Within just 80 years, Russian explorers had reached the Pacific Ocean, marking one of the fastest territorial expansions in human history. But here's what's fascinating. While Russia had claimed this vast territory, they faced an enormous challenge: how to populate and develop a land where winter temperatures regularly plunged to -94 degrees Fahrenheit. But why would anyone choose to live in such an inhospitable environment? For many, the answer was simple. They didn't choose at all. The Russian Empire, and later the Soviet Union, saw Siberia as the perfect location for exiles and prisoners. From political dissidents to common criminals, millions were sent to develop these harsh lands against their will. However, the story of Siberia's sparse population is not just about its harsh climate and history as a penal colony. It's about something far more fundamental: the very geography of the land itself. The geography of Russia's vast wilderness presents a challenge that even modern technology struggles to overcome. Picture this. Beneath the surface of nearly 2/3 of Russia lies something called permafrost, permanently frozen ground that never thaws, even in summer. Think of trying to build a city on frozen ground that can suddenly become unstable when it warms. Buildings sink and tilt, roads buckle and crack, and pipelines rupture. In fact, in Siberian cities like Yakutsk, many buildings need to be constructed on concrete pillars driven deep into the permafrost just to remain stable. It's like trying to build a metropolis on unstable jello. Possible, but incredibly expensive and risky. But there's an even bigger problem lurking under this frozen ground. As global temperatures rise, this permafrost is beginning to thaw, releasing greenhouse gases and creating vast sinkholes that can swallow entire buildings. Some of these craters are so large that locals have dubbed them doorways to the underworld. Yet permafrost is just one piece of this complex puzzle. Consider the sheer isolation of this region. Imagine trying to build a city where the nearest major population center is thousands of kilometers away. How do you transport building materials? Where do you get your food? How do you maintain supply lines through the harshest winters on Earth? Beneath the frozen ground, Russia has vast reserves of natural resources that make it one of the wealthiest countries in terms of raw materials. The region holds immense deposits of oil, natural gas, gold, diamonds, and other valuable minerals. During the Soviet era, entire cities were built around these resources, regardless of whether their locations made any practical sense. Take Norilsk, for example. It's the world's northernmost city with more than 100,000 people, and it's built entirely around nickel mining. But it's so far north that it experiences 45 days of complete darkness in winter. The average temperature is -14 degrees Fahrenheit, and for 9 months of the year, the city is covered in snow. You can't even reach it by road. It's only accessible by air and water. But the most striking aspect of Russia's geographical challenge isn't what's frozen, it's what flows. The country's major rivers all run north to south, not east to west. While that might not sound significant at first, it's actually created one of the biggest obstacles to development. Think about it. Most of Russia's population lives in the west, but most of its resources are in the east. The rivers, flowing toward the Arctic Ocean rather than across the country, can't serve as natural transportation corridors between these regions. It's like having a highway system that takes you where you don't need to go. But in an age of modern technology, why haven't Russians simply built their way around these challenges? Well, they've tried. The Trans-Siberian Railway, stretching an incredible 5,772 miles from Moscow to Vladivostok, was meant to be the steel backbone of Russian expansion eastward. However, this massive railway line cuts through only a small southern portion of Russia's territory. The vast majority of Siberia remains unconnected by rail or road. Attempting to build infrastructure in these regions is a constant battle against nature. Roads built on permafrost can buckle and crack within a single season. Power lines snap under the weight of ice. Even the most basic construction projects become exponentially more expensive the further north you go. In many Siberian regions, it costs 3 to 4 times more to build the same building compared to Moscow. Every nail, every brick, and every piece of equipment has to be transported at enormous distances through challenging terrain and weather conditions. It's like trying to build a house while paying quadruple the price for everything, and then having to rebuild parts of it every few years due to the harsh conditions. The Soviet Union tried to overcome these challenges through sheer force of will, establishing cities and industrial centers in locations that defied economic and environmental logic. They created what economists now call black holes, cities that consume more resources than they produce, existing only through massive government subsidies. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, many of these artificially supported settlements began to decline. Between 1989 and 2002, the Russian Far East lost close to 1 million people, nearly 1/7 of its population. Many simply packed up and moved west, leaving behind ghost towns and half-empty cities. But here's what makes this story truly fascinating. While humans struggle to populate these regions, the empty vastness of Siberia might actually be one of Russia's greatest assets for the future. These seemingly endless forests serve as one of the world's largest carbon sinks, helping to regulate global climate. The pristine wilderness provides a habitat for countless species found nowhere else on Earth. And those resources buried beneath the permafrost? They're becoming increasingly accessible thanks to new technologies, though this presents its own environmental challenges. The question now isn't just about populating these regions, but about finding a sustainable way to utilize their resources without destroying their unique ecosystems. In a world where most countries struggle with overpopulation, Russia faces a unique challenge: how to manage a territory so vast that large portions may never be suitable for large-scale human habitation. It's as if nature itself has drawn a line and said, "This far and no further." The modern Russian government has tried various strategies to encourage people to move eastward. They've offered free land, tax incentives, and higher salaries. However, these efforts have met with limited success. After all, when given a choice between a comfortable life in a mild climate and a challenging existence in one of the world's harshest environments, most people choose comfort. Just to put this in perspective, Siberia is about the size of Canada. Yet, while Canada's population is concentrated within 100 miles of its southern border, Siberia's population is scattered across its entire expanse, with many areas having less than 1 person per square kilometer. That's not just sparse, that's practically empty. And while we're pondering that, here's something else to consider. The Arctic region, including Russia's northern territories, contains an estimated 25% of the world's undiscovered oil and gas reserves. As global warming makes these areas more accessible, we might see a new chapter in the story of Russia's empty spaces, one where technology finally overcomes the challenges that nature has posed for centuries.